Hey guys, Nick with PhoneArena here, and the Sony Xperia Z2 is already on the market. It is Sony's current flagship and best smartphone to date, building up on all that made its predecessor, the Xperia Z1, so awesome. But a phone that's just as desirable is the new Htc One M8. Like the Xperia Z2, it is a top-of-the-line handset with lots to offer, especially when it comes to design and hardware capabilities. So, our job today is to find out which one of these two high-ends is the better phone. Let's get to it. The Sony Xperia Z2 and the Htc One M8 are two gorgeous smartphones that really stand out when it comes to design. On the Z2 we have a front and back sides made of glass with a one-piece metal frame around the sides. Holding the phone gives us a solid, reassuring feel about it. Its rectangular shape will probably not appeal to everyone, but we think that the Z2 looks pretty good the way it is. What's a little bit bothering, however, is that the phone feels bulky, partly because of its not-so-rounded corners, and partly because, well, the phone is pretty big in size. As for the Htc One M8, it is a beautiful smartphone encased in a metal-made body, and we can't help to think that the general audience would find it more attractive, at least visually, than the Xperia Z2. What's more, although HTC's top model is about as wide, as tall and as heavy as its rival, it fits better in the palm thanks to its rounded corners and curved backside. On the right side of the Xperia Z2, we find its power and volume keys. They are easy to reach but somewhat lacking in feedback. Below them resides the two-stage camera shutter key, and up there, behind a protective cover, is the slot for microSD cards. On the other side we find the SIM card slot along with the microUSB port. HTC has placed the power key on the top edge of the M8. Reaching it is a bit difficult since there is quite a bit of stretching that an index finger has to perform. To remedy the situation, HTC has added the option to activate the phone's screen with a double tap. The volume key is on the right side and could have had a little bit more travel to it. With the One M8, you also get a microSD card slot for memory expansion, but to access it, you'll need a pin to eject the tray on which the card is placed. Same is the case with the SIM card slot. Now, there is a good reason why the slots and ports of the Z2 are protected by these covers. The phone boasts an IP58 rating, which means that it is dust and water resistant, although not invincible, of course. The HTC One M8 should be able to handle a light water splash, but more serious dips may be fatal. The Sony Xperia Z2 sports a 5.2-inch touchscreen with a resolution of 1080 by 1920 pixels. The HTC One M8, despite being about as tall and wide as its rival, packs a slightly smaller 5-inch display with the same amount of pixels, 1080 by 1920. Of course, a difference of 0.2 inches isn't too big of a deal, but it still counts as an advantage for the Z2. Image quality, and image detail in particular, should not be of concern since both smartphones have more than enough pixels per inch stuffed on their displays. The display on the Z2 is of the IPS LCD variety. It features Sony's triluminous display technology with the so-called live color LEDs, and the X-Reality image engine is baked into the software, adding contrast and sharpness when photos or videos are being displayed. In plain words, the display is a beauty that produces lively, eye-catching colors. These colors are a bit oversaturated, but not really in a bad way. We measured a color temperature of 6900 kelvins, which is close to the reference point of 6500 kelvins. The HTC One M8 comes with a Super LCD 3 display, which has slightly colder whites. And actually, our measurements confirm that, as we measured a color temperature of 7150 kelvins. Here's how it looks next to the Z2, and the bluish whites should be easy to spot. At the same time, colors don't look as saturated as they do on the Z2 and its display, but technically they are represented more accurately, as confirmed by our display benchmark. Outdoor visibility isn't really an issue with any of these two phones, although the HTC One M8 is a bit better in that respect. The screen on the M8 has an output of 490 nits, while the Z2 gets to 454 nits. Android 4.4.2 KitKat, which is the latest version of the platform right now, runs on both the Sony Xperia Z2 and on the Htc One M8. Don't expect seeing tracks of stock Android on either of them, however. The two run custom user interfaces, which add new visual elements to the experience, along with a number of functional ones. If you have ever used an Android device, you should be feeling at home with Sony's custom interface. It is organized much like the stock one, with several home screens for apps and widgets, and an app drawer listing all your installed applications. In addition to this, there's a side panel in the app drawer for sorting and searching through installed applications. This panel hasn't been designed optimally, however, as we tend to toggle it on by accident every once in a while. Sony has spiced things up a bit by adding theme support and a handful of its own live wallpapers, thus giving users more personalization flexibility. Toggle buttons in the notification panel are also present. Another handy feature are the so-called small apps. These are tools that run in their own window hovering above the UI. You only get a few of these preloaded, but the Play Store contains additional ones for you to try. Sense 6.0, which runs on the Htc One M8, is a bit more radical departure from stock Android, although you can make it feel a lot more stock-ish with a few tweaks. One of the highlights here is Blinkfeed, which is a home screen dedicated to aggregating your social networking news feeds with your articles from online news outlets. You might like this feature if you're a heavy social networking user, but in case you're not, you're free to turn Blinkfeed off. The Sense 6.0 experience is complemented by various gestures used to accomplish a variety of tasks. A double tap on the screen when the handset is in standby, for example, will turn the display on, as if its power key has been pressed. Then a swipe up can be used to unlock the device. A swipe to the right will display Blinkfeed, and a swipe to the left will take us to the home screen. It is also neat that the camera can be launched by placing the phone horizontally and pressing any of its volume buttons. We tested Sony's Onscreen Keyboard, which comes loaded on the Xperia Z2, and we ended up feeling quite pleased. It has been developed with focus on personalization, and it can be easily tailored to the user's preferences. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. Its accuracy is top-notch. The virtual keyboard on the Htc One M8 is also a pretty good one, with plenty of options to configure and languages to select from. Personally, we find the one on the Z2 a little bit more accurate, but at the end of the day, using an on-screen keyboard efficiently is often a matter of how used your thumbs are to it. A Snapdragon 801 system-on-chip is found inside both the Sony Xperia Z2 and the Htc One M8. The silicon has a quad-core Crate 400 CPU with a 2.3 GHz maximum clock speed, which makes it really fast. As a matter of fact, the whole system-on-chip is one of the best around. Yet surprisingly, it wasn't hard to spot some differences in performance between the two devices. The Xperia Z2 just doesn't feel as snappy as the Htc One M8, and the software might have something to do with that. But when it comes to running heavy apps or intensive 3D games, both smartphones are pretty much equally fast. There are 3 GB of RAM inside the Xperia Z2, while the Htc One M8 has 2 GB of RAM. Both have no troubles with multitasking, but the Z2 can be considered a bit more future-proof because of that extra gig of RAM. Chrome is the web browser preloaded onto the Xperia Z2. It is fast, responsive, and comfortable to use. It inflates text in paragraphs, which makes it easier to read. Those who use Google's browser on their other devices will enjoy its option to sync bookmarks and tabs between them. On the One M8, we find a browser that is simply labeled as Internet, along with Chrome, which also comes preloaded. The former handles even the heaviest of web pages without breaking a sweat. It will not inflate text for you, however, and we're not fans of its tab-switching interface. Of course, you're free to use Chrome instead, or an alternative third-party browser from the Google Play Store. One of the biggest assets that the Xperia Z2 has to offer is its 20.7 megapixel camera with G-lens optics and a larger than average sensor. The camera application has a clean and intuitive interface with large buttons for taking photo or video. By default, the camera starts in Intelligent Auto mode. This mode sets the scene automatically, and it tends to be pretty good at that on the Z2. There is also a manual mode which gives users more control over the image with its scenes and adjustments. In addition, Sony has added slow-motion video effects, background defocusing for professional-looking close-ups, 4K video support, and more. The Htc One M8 has an ultra-pixel camera with only 4 megapixels of resolution, which happens to be its biggest drawback. Practically, this camera is very similar to the one found on last year's HTC One model. What's new, however, is the secondary camera, which gives us the option to apply special effects to the image, such as to blur out the background or to convert images in 3D-like renderings. The camera UI isn't bad. We like that it is clean, with no knobs and toggles getting in the way, but switching between photo and video mode or between front and rear cameras takes more taps than it does on the Z2. But ultimately, image quality is what makes or breaks a camera, and in this category, the Xperia Z2 is a class above the One M8. First of all, its images pack a lot more detail. Also, Z2's camera tends to be better at setting the exposure correctly, while the M8 might leave the photo under or overexposed. On top of that, digital noise is easier to spot in photos from the M8. When it comes to recording daytime videos, the cameras on the Z2 and the M8 are pretty much equally good. We must also note that the two capture high-quality sound in their videos. At night, however, the Z2 does a better job, as its videos turn out smoother, while the M8 may contain quite a bit of motion blur. This is the Walkman music player on the Sony Xperia Z2. There is a lot to like about it, from the beautiful and functional interface to the multitude of options for fine-tuning the sound reproduction. You get an equalizer, which you can adjust manually, and Clear Audio Plus, which attempts to improve the sound depending on what is being played. The HTC One M8 has a pleasant-looking music player. If you have any album art missing, it can pull it from the internet for you, but then again, the Z2 can do that as well. We like the inclusion of a music visualizer, but we aren't sure why HTC has not added an equalizer to its music application. Watching videos on the Sony Xperia Z2 is a pleasure thanks to its large and vivid display. And the stock video player plays back video of any popular format. The dedicated Movies application has a clean and stylish user interface, with a built-in option to edit videos that have been shot with the Z2. There isn't a dedicated video player application on the HTC One M8, but you can always download and install a third-party one. Videos are listed in and played from the Gallery application. The video playback UI is clean, simple, and can also be used to trim videos in case that's required. Both phones have front-facing speakers that produce high-quality stereo sound. The HTC One M8, however, outpaces the Z2 in that respect. Its speakers are louder and with much more depth, while the ones on the Xperia Z2 cannot reach the same output level and have less presence in the lower register. Another perk that makes the HTC One M8 stand above the Z2 is its built-in infrared blaster. With its help, HTC's phone turns into an intelligent remote control for your TV and set-top box. The Xperia Z2 does not have an infrared blaster. Call quality is important for any phone, but on the Xperia Z2 it might have not been given enough attention. The earpiece is okay, sound coming out of it is definitely loud enough, but it is too sharp with some tones. On the other side of the line, our voice sounds noticeably digitized. Phone calls made with the HTC One M8 sound excellent on both sides. The earpiece is loud and doesn't crackle even at the loudest setting, while the microphone captures clear sound that isn't disturbed by much background noise. Battery life shouldn't be an issue with the Sony Xperia Z2. It has a generous 3200 mAh battery, which is rated at 19 hours of 3G talk time or a month of standby. Music and video playback times are set to be 120 and 10 hours respectively. If the phone is used with moderation, a couple of days between charges can be expected. We must mention that Sony has baked in its stamina mode into the phone's software. When enabled, it may significantly extend the handset's standby time by turning unused radios and features off. The HTC One M8 has a smaller 2600 mAh battery, although the difference in capacity shouldn't worry you much. According to HTC, that should be enough for up to 20 hours of 3G talk time, while standby time is quoted as over 20 days. Having this in mind, we are confident that if you're not pushing it too much, you will squeeze a couple of days on a single charge out of the HTC One M8. And let's not forget to mention the built-in extreme power saving mode. Turning it on will shut down all of the phone's non-essential features, but may extend its usage time dramatically. When it comes to pricing, the Sony Xperia Z2 and the Htc One M8 are two of the most expensive phones that money can buy right now, but they are worth their price, given all the great features they have to offer. Which one of the two you should pick, however, depends on your needs and taste. Both phones are built with attention to detail. We would say that the Htc One M8 fits a bit better in the palm, but the Z2 is still okay as large as it is, not to mention that it compensates for its size with a slightly larger screen and a water-resistant construction. The display on the Htc One M8 is definitely an eye-catching one and with more accurate colors. The 5.2-inch display on the Z2 is better at representing whites, but its pumped-up colors aren't as accurate. Then there's the performance of these two phones. Even though both have the same Snapdragon 801 chip inside of them, the Htc One M8 feels slightly snappier, while the Sony Xperia Z2 might be a bit laggy if its home screens are too packed. But when it comes to playing heavy games, both phones should perform equally well. As for their UIs, Sense 6.0 on the Htc One M8 is well polished and very consistent. Social network users would probably be happy with Blinkfeed combining all their feeds in one single stream. Sony's user interface, on the other hand, isn't as radically different from stock Android, but it does add a number of handy modifications, including its small apps and its various options for personalization. And lastly, the Sony Xperia Z2 takes better photos with its splendid 20.7 megapixel camera. The 4 megapixel ultra-pixel camera on the Htc One M8 isn't bad, but it doesn't meet the expectations one would have for a top-of-the-line smartphone. Thank you for watching our video comparison between the Sony Xperia Z2 and the Htc One M8. To learn more about these two great smartphones, just visit our website PhoneArena.com.